Okay, so we're looking at where is it? We're looking at Endpoint Protector. So what it does is there's a virtual machine that controls the endpoint applications. It has a whole range of DLP, endpoint defense, and insight features. It's actually not bad. But one thing that I did notice, which is what we're talking about, I only usually talk about the bad stuff. I'm doing this video with the understanding that this issue will be fixed by the time you see this video. So if you've got an old version of the software, update it. But if you don't use the software at all, take the concept of how we find this and maybe use it in your own environments to find your own bugs, or to get your own sort of assurance that it's not it's not behaving like this. So this is really just specifically for plugging devices in and having software on a computer make a judgment call on whether or not that device is allowed, and how it behaves as secure software or security software. So I've got my endpoint here, blocking USB. I struggled setting it up, but I think I just didn't set the timing of the frequency of the updates, so I kind of gave up yesterday. And I was going to uninstall it today, and it worked, so I'm happy with that. So, and I've also got my my Mac, because I can't use my USB. I've got my Mac over here, so when I do stuff to the USB, I'll have to do it on the Mac, which is right behind me. Anyway, so I'm going to plug in my normal USB, which is the one you've just seen on the Mac. Let me just unplug it from the Mac, and I'm going to plug it into my machine with the Endpoint Protector running, which is a EPP service, Endpoint Protector service. And I'm going to show you what happens via Procmon. We're only interested in disk activity, so let me just remove all that and break it down to justify my settings. So we're not interested in registry, although registry might be an interesting place to look for binary planting opportunities. Context IS did a really good piece on it a while ago, years ago in fact. So yeah, this isn't new, this method, but it seems to be overlooked. Everywhere I look, there's usually something to be played with, but sometimes it's about accepting risk. So for example, if there's binary planting in a user level environment, i.e. in that user's profile somewhere, people tend to be less interested in that. Whereas this one's interesting because a USB drive considered as an untrusted or a hostile device that's supposedly being actively blocked by the machine gives you a false sense of confidence, when actually in this case currently it will read files off the device that it's blocked from the user, and then consume those files that it's looking for and execute them. So we want disk activity, but we're only interested in name not found. The whole point here is a lot of programs are looking for residual files in the wrong places, and it might be that the application no longer needs those DLLs to function, or it used to call them, it doesn't need them anymore, or it's just looking in the wrong places. It might need to look in predefined locations as opposed to sort of looking in the current directory and then working out where it might be. It should know where it is. And then the next thing is integrity checking. So if you're pulling files off a device that's hostile, you really want to be making sure that those files are the files that you need. So just because you've got the right name, you don't let anybody called Dave in the nightclub. You know the Dave that you want to let in. You know who he is. He's got some ID. In this case, it's just looking for the name. I don't know if that analogy works, but whatever. And the next thing is, we're not interested in things that are happening on the C drive, because C's not really hostile. There's an assumed trust that you give to the user anyway, and that's expected. So let's edit this filter, and let's go path begins with D. Include, so that should clear things up quite nicely. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to plug in this drive. It's going to look for things on the drive, but also block me from using it at the same time. And then once it's pushed files to the drive, it will then let me create a password, which will create an encrypted volume, which will then allow me to write to that encrypted volume with that password. And then I'm going to bring it back over to the Mac just to show you what it's populated the drive with. And then I'm going to talk about what we've found in Process Monitor, and then I'm going to weaponize a USB drive, and then I'm going to plug it in and see if it compromises my user account or the computer. So plugging in the empty USB drive. So EPP service is looking for easylock.exe as anti-authority system, and it's not found it, so it's copied EasyLock over to the drive and ran it. But it's also looking for this folder, and if it's not there, then it'll create one. And it's looking for these DLL files that don't exist in this config file. We got version in there, so it's probably no. Okay, cool. So I'm going to do that later because I've got a trial from of the VM, and then I don't have a password. Just do some shit. Cool. So now I can write to the encrypted part of the volume. I won't start browsing around my file folder. You don't need to see that stuff. But this is the application working as expected. Now, if you didn't see this, that would look totally fine, normal. So what we're going to do is we're going to create an executable called easylock.exe, and we're going to put it on a malicious, in quotes, a malicious pen drive. And we can also use DLLs as well, but in our case, let's just use the executable because. One thing to note as well is that on USB drives, you know, if sorry, not USB drives, if the user's view settings are to not show hidden files, there's it'd be quite easy to just create a payload easylock.exe and then mark it as hidden on a USB drive. And if people think that the USB area of their security policy is safe because I found a USB drive on the floor, it'll get blocked anyway, and then I can create an encrypted volume-free USB drive for me. You know, there's an inherited trust problem at the moment, but I've spoken to these guys. They're very responsive. They're very polite. They're very grateful. So, you know, this will get fixed quickly. Okay, cool. So, get rid of that. So I'm going to go over to, let me get out of Cobalt Strike. I'm going to go over to my my Mac, if it'll let me, and we're going to create an easy lock. Not sure if that'll go on the other screen. Where's my VNC server? Sorry. Well, okay, I'm just going to go over to my Mac and create the easylock.exe because my USB is obviously blocked. Right, sorry, the VNC bit didn't work. My computer went to sleep, so I could piss off. Right, I have my new weaponized USB with easylock.exe in there, and I'm going to plug it in, and let's get Procmon running. So anything that happens after here is a result of me plugging in a naughty USB. And let me just go get my CS running. Should put that down there actually. Cool. Right. So let's put that over there. Let's put that over there. And plugging in. Oh, remove the old one. And plugging in a new one. So it's looking for the data sig. It's looking for the DLLs. So from here downwards, all of this is everything that's happening. So I do that later, and then here's my shell. Just sorry, go that. Just go a bit. Yeah, might as well. Cool. So I've got my shell, and everything looks normal. So there's no crashes, which is quite nice as well. And I can actually still use the software too, which is cool. So everything's working as expected, and I have my connection. So I just need to wait for that to get back in touch with me, and I'll get a little pop up there. But the point is that it works. and that needs to be fixed. So let me just do some cool shit. I'll just wait for this to kick in just to validate. Whenever it's ready. There we go. Cool. That's my high integrity process, but that's really more about Cobalt Strike rather than Easy Lock. So now I've got a foothold in the computer. I could do key login and capture encrypted passwords, or, well, to be honest, if you're transferring files to the USB drive, that means that the files are already on the computer or at the mercy of that user account. So I could start mooching around the environment and look at what permissions are available to that user account and so on and so forth. Anyway, so yeah, that's it. There's other USB stuff as well. So lacy private public. If you create this DLL, you'll get a shell. I've just used the calc. So just, you know, the Didier Stevens calc.dll, and I just rename it. So that's one there, and that follows the same principle as this one, apart from it doesn't have a service running on the operating system that's trying to pull it off there. You would have to get access to the USB drive. So the attack would be, for the lacy one at least, you have access to the pen drive, but you can't access the encrypted volume because you don't know the password. So what you could do is, if you position this, mark it as hidden, and then maybe that is hidden. So when the user runs it to decrypt their volume, you get a shell on them. And what else? There's this one as well. This is the agent that will allow you to do the same thing. Same principles before. Agent pops a shell. And then there's Easy Lock as well, which was just a bit nicer because of the agent. If the others had agents, I'd be interested. And I'm kind of interested in looking at other DLP products too, but I just can't be asked setting it all up and going through the process of pretending that I'm an actual customer. But be interesting. If it's easy to get hold of and it's easy to configure, I'd like to look for the same thing. So the same thing principle is something that's blocking an untrusted device is looking on the untrusted device for files that it's going to consume and inherently trust, which is wrong. The technical fix would be to create a manifest file, prevent all of this stuff being loaded from these locations. But I'm not sure about the easylock.exe. There needs to be an integrity check on there somewhere. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed it.